Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Tidehunter. Tide is really best known for his ultimate Ravage, so it's one of these big teamfight ultimates that everyone kind of knows a little bit about. Even if you don't know much about Dota, or you're just getting into it, you probably know about a spell like Ravage. But that's not the only thing this hero does. This hero is also extremely tanky and hard to bring down because he has damage reduction, damage block, and shrugs off debuffs with relative ease. And we can see that once we take a look at the abilities. But in general, this hero is great at playing off lane. That's the main way that you play this hero, the main role, because he's great at initiation, jumping in, counter initiation, stunning everybody in an AoE. He's also great at frontlining and being hard to bring down with all that damage reduction and tankiness. As for Tide's counters, his traditional weaknesses are anything that he can't just shrug off, so any debuff that is applied to him that's not a stun, a silence, or a slow that he can easily purge, so things like leashes or things like, Axe Call that you actually can't dispel that. So that's one counter to Tide. The other thing is any kind of break, so Silver Edge or any ability that breaks really does hurt Tide because now he actually can get locked down, silenced, and stunned, or any damage that cuts through his damage block and damage reduction, like pure damage or anything that just reduces his HP in general. But before we can understand how to play Tide, we have to take a look at his abilities. So now that we understand Tide in general, we can take a look at his abilities and see how he's able to be that really tanky offlane hero that also has great counter initiation and initiation with that team fight stun like we talked about. Tide's first ability, Gush, is very straightforward and easy to understand. It's a single target ability that you can just press on an enemy, and Tide spits out some water, they take some damage, and they are slowed for a short duration, and during that slow, they also have their armor reduced, which is great for synergizing with one of his other abilities that we'll take a look at in a second. Then Tide's next ability is Kraken Shell, and this is the ability that really makes this hero tanky because every time they take attack damage, it's just reduced by a flat number. So we can see here at level 15 with 100 damage from this axe, this Tide really takes almost no damage, and then you can actually activate Kraken Shell to get double the effect at the cost of movement speeds. You can see if I move around here, this is my movement speed, but then once I press this, I'm moving a lot slower, but now I literally take 0 damage from this axe. So you can see how this can make this hero extremely, extremely tanky. And then we have Anchor Smash, and this is a physical damage AoE ability. So you can see there it has an AoE on the ground, and you just press it, and then anything in that AoE takes damage no matter where they are in relation to Tide. So this is great for harassing the enemy, but also for farming. So pushing in creep waves or farming creep camps, even stacks in the jungle. So it's the main farming ability that this hero has. But the other thing that's great about it is it does physical damage, like I said, so that synergizes really well with the armor reduction from Gush. So Gush is magical, but then their armor is reduced, so now you're chasing them down because they're slowed, and you're doing more damage with Anchor Smash because it's physical, and it scales with that armor reduction from Gush. That's a great synergy there. The other big thing that Anchor Smash does is it also makes this hero tankier because it puts a debuff on the enemy that reduces their damage. So we can see when we use Anchor Smash, we can look at the axe. He now has a debuff that reduces all of his outgoing damage. So not only do you have this damage block from Kraken Shell, now enemies that are trying to click you, or even enemy creeps or jungle creeps, are doing way less damage to you. So that's why you can go into the jungle and you can farm these stacks because you have the block and you have the damage reduction, so you really become a tanky beast whenever you combine these two abilities. And then lastly, we have the ultimate, which is Ravage, which is one of the quintessential highlights, classic Dota ability, and you can see the AoE there is huge. You basically just press it, and after a short animation, all of these tentacles come out from around Tide, going to the outside of Tide. So basically, if an enemy is further away from Tide, they're actually going to get hit by the Ravage after a small delay. So they do have time to react, to run away, to press BKB or other things like that. So it's not an instant stun. So the closer you are to the enemy, the more instant it's going to be. But if people have really, really good reaction time, sometimes they can actually press BKB before you get the Ravage off. So just beware, it's not an instant ability. There is some ability to dodge it, but the AoE is so big that you're usually going to catch a lot of heroes in any kind of team fight if you're initiating, or especially if you're counter initiating with this ability. And then we have Tide's Ags and his Shard, both great abilities, and the Shard is really, really good. It's dead in the water. It gives a new ability that you can press here, and this basically puts an anchor on the enemy hero, and now they're leashed, and they basically can't run away from this anchor. It takes 4 hits to kill, and this is a great counter to traditional counters to Tide. So a lot of things that Tide doesn't like are heroes like Slark. They can pounce in and out. There's a lot of mobility. He also just steals stats from Tide, but now Tide has a good counter to that kind of hero, or heroes like Ursa, or heroes like Storm or Ember, any of these mobility heroes that Tide really doesn't have a great counter to, or counters him because of the magic damage or the stuff that goes through his damage block. Now he has a way to deal with those, and this is really one of those things that makes Tide a completely different hero with this Shard. It's just so good. And then Ags is also good, but it is a little bit situational, and basically what it does is it upgrades Gush to no longer be a single target ability, but like kind of a very long distance directional ability, where now you spit out water and it's a bigger kind of AoE and it hits everything in that direction. So it does a lot of the same things that Gush always does. It's just a better ability because it's not only one target. It's the creep wave or a bunch of heroes and those kinds of things. So it does more damage. It's just overall upgrading Gush to make it better. Then the last thing I wanted to show you here is Tide's passive, and this is what allows this hero to shrug off or dispel any stun, silence, or slow that's dispellable just by passively taking damage. So if we apply Battle Hunger to the Tide, and then we gave Axe a Divine Rapier so he can do more damage, we can see after Tide takes a certain amount of damage, he will just dispel this Battle Hunger and it'll just disappear. So you can see a small animation occurs there, and then the Battle Hunger goes away. And this is not just slows like Battle Hunger, this is any kind of stun or silence as well. So usually Tide is able to get off his abilities, but there are abilities like Berserker's Call that you can't dispel no matter how much damage you take. So if this call happens and then you just right-click the Tide a bunch, you will see that the Blubber ability will go off. You'll have that animation, but Tide will still be stunned because this can't be dispelled. So it's one of those rare abilities that actually can't be dispelled. But still, those are the things that counter Tide. For the most part, just regular stuns, regular slows, regular silences don't do much to Tide unless he's broken by something like a Silver Edge or some other ability that breaks and disables his passive here. Then for Tide's facets, we have the first facet, which is Kraken Swell, and this is the facet that's more of the damage block tanky facet, because every time a hero dies under the effect of Anchor Smash, you get permanent damage block. So if you're having a good game and participating in a lot of kills, at the end of the game, 30-40 minutes in, you'll be almost impossible to kill, but it does kind of require you to participate in these fights and have a decent game to have some effectiveness. But you know, permanent infinite scaling is always going to be good in some sense. But the other one is Krill Eater, and this one is kind of geared towards more of a carry Tidehunter, but it's still great in the off lane as well. And so basically how this works is you start off a little bit smaller, like your hero is a little bit tinier on the screen. You also have less attack range, and Anchor Smash radius is also reduced. But then as you gain more levels, you grow bigger, kind of like how Tiny does. And then also your attack range and your Anchor Smash radius are also increasing over time, and you have a bigger strength gain, so you're getting even tankier, doing even more damage. So this is kind of offensively geared and more of a scaling Tide, where earlier on in the game he's a little bit weaker, but then obviously 30, 40, 50 minutes in, you're extremely hard to bring down still. You have way more HP, and you're doing insane damage in a huge AoE with Anchor Smash. So that's Krill Eater. It's the better one right now, but these are still two very good facets for the hero. So now that we understand Tide in general, we can jump into a game and see how he's played. So Tide's laning stage is very interesting because you have 3 abilities that you can put points into, and it's very matchup dependent which abilities you want to skill. Gush is very good for aggressive potential, and you probably want to get at least 1 point in that ability, maybe even level 1, to run people down, slow them, do some damage, and that kind of stuff. But then the other 2 abilities, it's really about how much do you want Kraken Shell? Are you getting right-clicked a lot, and can you reduce that damage a ton and then just be a tanky beast in the lane? Or does the enemy have a lot of magic damage, so the Kraken Shell really isn't going to help you much other than maybe 1 point, and you want to put more points into Anchor Smash because that damage reduction overall is going to be better, plus it's going to allow you to clear through the creep wave, push it in, and then farm jungle if you need to, if you kind of can't have a good lane in that game. So it really is matchup dependent, kind of analyzing the matchups, knowing what's going to happen in the lane and then skilling correctly to maximize your potential in the lane as Tide. But the fact that Tide has 3 great abilities can also be his weakness, because early on in the lane, obviously, you're only level 1, 2, 3. You don't really have a lot of points to put into your abilities. So it's not until later in the laning stage, once you really start hitting 5, 6, 7, 8, that then you start becoming a tankier beast, harder to deal with, where you can push the lane in, be more aggressive, and then especially once you hit 6, looking to use that ultimate to kill a support, even rotate, kill the other lanes, or kill the carry in your lane. It just depends a lot, again, on the situational matchups and how good the lane is going. Or sometimes you can just really focus on farming, focus on getting your early items, whether that's a blink or whether that's something else to make you even more tanky for the team, or even more able to push your advantage in general. And then for the mid game, Tide really is one of those aggressive wall tanky heroes where he can just park himself in a certain spot on the map, and it takes a lot for the enemy to push him out or to deal with him, because he is so tanky with that damage reduction. He's hard to burst down. He's hard to stun and lock down. He can always get his spells off and have his team react. And so because of that, it's good to just be aggressive on the map, you know, push waves in, take towers, and just dare the enemy to come fight you, because then you're making space for your other cores as well. Or maybe you can even turn the fight with your big ultimate with Ravage. And sometimes even the threat of having Ravage is enough to just scare the enemy off as well. So that's really what you want to be taking advantage of in the mid game for Tide. But you do need to be a little bit careful, because you can still get burst down by a lot of magic damage if you don't have a lot of HP at this point, if you only have like 1 item or so. And then there is a time later on, as the mid game kind of ends and it gets to late game, that you kind of need to start being a little bit more careful, because people have more items, more damage, and more of everything that can actually bring you down at that point. And then you become more of a team fighter, more of an initiator or counter initiator with your ultimate in general. And then when your ultimate is down, you have to be a little bit more careful as we go into those later portions of the game. So then for team fighting, Tide is really all about 2 things. He either can be that frontliner or that initiator, where you're just like walking in front and you're snowballing with the team and they can't really deal with you, or you're kind of just smoked up, or you're running around with blink and then you're blinking in and killing somebody full to 0 with Ravage and then follow-up stuns. Or maybe if it's a worse game, or you don't really need to be that initiation, you can actually be a counter initiation. If the enemy's going on your team or going on you guys, you can kind of sit in the back and then wait to use Ravage when the enemy has committed all of their spells. But the biggest thing you need to be careful of is BKB. You really, really don't want to be blowing your Ravage on any BKB. So if the enemy is jumping in, or if the enemy is using BKBs, you don't want to waste Ravage. Sometimes it's enough to just sit back, wait for BKBs to be down, and then use Ravage later on in the fight after nobody has BKB left, and that's when you can really use Ravage to turn the fight and have the most effectiveness in the team fights. But you need to make sure that your whole team isn't dead by the time that happens. So it really depends on the situation and the timing of the game and what items the enemy has and where you're at in the game to make sure you're using Ravage most effectively, because that is his biggest tool in the fights, especially if he's not able to be that tanky frontliner and he is kind of being able to be burst down at that point in the game. But the ideal game for Tide is that later in the game you get so tanky that the enemy really can't deal with you. You have a ton of HP, you're just shrugging off every stun, they can't burst you down, there's really nothing that they can do to kill you if they focus on you, but they also kind of can't just ignore you, because you're doing a ton of right-click damage, you're using your shard, you have the threat of Ravage, you're using Anchor Smash a ton to kill people and just do a ton of damage reduction. So it's like the Tide is just so annoying, but we really can't kill him, and that's the ideal situation for Tide. But some games, you're just going to get into those spots where you are a Ravage machine, and in those cases, you really just want to get Blink, you want to get Refresher, and just be a Ravage kind of on cooldown, a Ravage bot, and that's all you're really contributing, just in certain games because you're having a bad game or whatnot. But that's okay, because it's such a big and good ultimate that having 2 Ravages can really turn the game if you are able to get to that point. And that, everyone, is my Tidehunter guide. As always, if you liked the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.